this current situation we're in, it can be quite questionable, because when one thinks about what governments and authorities can do, and in this case, the lockdown has caused people to stop enjoying one of their most fundamental rights, which is to conduct business and to trade and to earn an income. It's actually a common law right, and it's quite amazing that the governments of the world have withdrawn that right from us and made us stay home and literally starve in some cases. And it got me to thinking as to how and where does the government's authority over us go? And one can say that history is probably going to record this current event and have a lot to say about it, you know. And of course, with hindsight and 2020 vision, one might say this is what the world should have done, and that's what the world should have done. But certainly it is unprecedented. We are arguably in a situation that was last matched by the Spanish flu some 100 years ago. Which would be original perception, you know, stay home and you won't get sick. But the truth of it is that we're all going to get this virus at one point or another, the vast majority of us. And so it's not as if staying home is going to save us from the eventuality of it. And from the rationale that I can best understand, it seems to be that this whole thing is just to delay and spread the infection of people is such that the health system can cope and give hopefully everyone a fair chance to get a good health treatment. In other words, to avoid the hospital from being overwhelmed. From what I can understand is if the flu was left to run its course, the vast majority of people will have been infected within 10 to 20 weeks. And life would have gone on. And with modern medicine, most of those people would have made most people who would have got infected and got really ill would make a recovery with the aid of modern medicine. What has surprised me is that right across the world, everyone has done the same thing. If one looks at history, different nations would do different things because people are different. You know, we dress differently, we eat different kinds of food, we have different styles of building homes, customs, and what have you. But to get the vast majority of the world to suddenly basically apply the same formula to dealing with the situation is quite astounding, and is certainly beyond politics and diplomacy. Because I've often seen countries just do something different to another country to make a point. You know, various negotiations and treaties often fall apart simply because of a power struggle and you know, we're going to do it differently from you because that's the way we are. So one realizes that there's an incredibly high degree of compliance, and it would seem that at an individual level there's some sort of massive mission of foolishness, and it's amazing that there's not been an uprising or rioting or protesting on a large scale due to these differences of opinion. I mean, if one considers the Arab Spring, for example, which swept across that part of the world, because people were just not happy with their current leadership, whereas now they're happy to stay home and face economic ruin. It's quite incredible. So one realizes that God's hand is in this. There's no other way something like this could happen on a global scale. And this reminds us about respecting the authority of God. And God instructs us to, in His Word, to respect the authority of the people that God puts over us, namely our governments and leaders. Whether we comply with them out of fear or respect the authority, or just simply for the fear of the flu, I guess each individual and people across the world have had their reasons as to why they comply. However, in our case, that we understand and respect that people are put in power over us by God's authority, puts us in an interesting situation, because we realize that we have to obey. And when we turn to Scripture and have a look at this, we can see, for example, if we look at Daniel 2:21, God createth times and seasons, He removeth and setteth up kings. Daniel 4:17, the Most High rulers of the kingdom of men, and gives unto whom He will, and sets over us the lowliest of men. We also see, for example, in Nehemiah, that our possessions are at the king's pleasure. For Nehemiah 9, verses 36 to 37, behold, we are the servants this day, for our land thou hast givest us unto our fathers. Yet the fruit thereof and the good thereof, behold, we are the servants in it, and yieldeth much increase unto the kings whom thou hast set over us, because of our sins. And we have dominion over our bodies, over our cattle, at their pleasure. And we are in great distress. We can also consider the case of Joseph in Egypt during the famine, where by the end of the famine, the Pharaoh owned the land, the people, everything. So these and other examples show that, our possessions and the land we live on and everything we have is on the grace of the authorities who are under the authority of God. One also realizes that kings and governments will collapse if they do what's not in God's will. For example, if we consider King Nebuchadnezzar in Daniel chapter 4, where he became proud, and quoting from verse 30, the king spoke and said, "It's not this great Babylon that I built for the house of the kingdom, but by my power, in the honor of my majesty." While the words were still within the king's mouth, a voice fell from heaven, "O King Nebuchadnezzar, to you it's spoken, the kingdom will be departed from you." So as much as we feel that the authorities are maybe are taking things a bit too far over us, we have to realize and appreciate that if they take it too far, God will deal with them. And in that, we can take comfort in that. We can know that what they do is in the limits and restrictions of what God is going to allow. And they have to, the authorities, even knowing or unknowingly, have to work within the bounds that God has set. We can also consider how, for example, in 2 Kings 5, verse 1, that Naaman, he was the captain of the host and Syria, a great man, and his master, and honorable because of him. The Lord gave deliverance unto Syria, and he was a mighty man, but yet he was a leper. So even that, even though you're in power and have the dominion over people, you could also, in case of Nehemiah, be a leper and suffer at God's hand. We realize that God works in the kingdoms of men. He gets the kingdoms and the powers to do His will. If we consider, for example, the case in 2 Chronicles, chapter 21, verse 16, "Moreover, the Lord stirred up against Jeroboam the spirit of the Philistines and of the Arabians, and that they were near the Ephesians. So God brings about these events. In 2 Chronicles 33, we have similar examples. So we have to consider how this impacts us and what this all means. And there's many references of this, including in the New Testament. For example, in Acts 23:5, where Paul says, "I will not, brethren, that he was the high priest, for it's written, thou shalt not speak evil of the rulers of thy people." Romans 9:17, for the scripture saith unto the Pharaoh, even for this same purpose I have raised thee up, that I might show the power through you, that my name might be declared against throughout all the earth. And many examples, many of them. And what I also found interesting, which I read recently and got me thinking along these lines, is that in Timothy, verse 1 Timothy chapter 2, verses 1 and 2, for kings and all those of authority, we need to pray that we may lead a quiet and pleasurable life in goodness and all honesty. So God instructs us to pray for our rulers and our authorities, and be thankful that when we do have peace and prosperity and can live in comfort, that the rulers have made this possible. It's quite an interesting thought, because you begin to realize that good times and bad times are made possible by God's will through the authorities that are placed over us. And the thought that crossed my mind now was, at what point can we say, no, the governments and authorities over us have overstepped the mark? Because we have many examples of where people have had to submit to the authority. We're taught that slaves have to submit to the authority of their master and put in a good day's work with good cheer. But there must be something where there's a line can be drawn in the sand and say, no, this is beyond what you're allowed to do. And I spent quite a bit of time thinking about examples that must be in scripture that can guide us on this. And having never actually considered this or studied this, I suddenly realized that I couldn't put my hand on something directly or easily. And I basically found only one case, and it'd be interesting to hear from you later if there are other cases or other circumstances where we can back the rule of authority and say, no, this is something we're not going to do. And the only case I have found so far is the case where we were asked to worship somebody other than God. It seems to be the only example I can find where we can say no to the authorities. And one of these examples is the case of Daniel, where he was instructed, or everybody in the kingdom was instructed to worship the statue and to worship the king. And Daniel basically refused to and continued to pray to God. And for this, his punishment was to go to the lion's den. And what is interesting to see is he doesn't challenge or fight this. He accepts the punishment. He accepts the authority, the power of the authority over him to take that punishment of going to the lion's den. So what one can see from this is that the authority that's placed over us has authority over everything in our lives. Even to the point that when we do stand up against authority, in the case of not worshipping anything other than God, we need to face the punishment that's given to us for disobeying that law, which is quite an interesting thought. And in Daniel's case, go into the lion's den, and he was delivered from that. The other case is likewise with Daniel's colleagues that ended up in the furnace for what they stood for. We can even see in the case of Christ, he submitted to the authorities and ended up dying a cruel death at their hands, where Christ could so easily have stood against it and call upon the angels to save him, because he must have had this understanding that authorities have literally got authority over everything. It is quite a scary and daunting thought. And I'd love to find any other cases in the Bible where we can turn around to authorities and say no. And how and when we can make our point known. It's an interesting thought, and I thought I would have shared this with you today, and to see how this current situation in our lives, which is affecting the entire world, how we can work through it and trust in God's guidance and know that it's all in His will, and it'll work out the way He wishes it to. I've been able to explain what I've been trying to think and put it through to you, and I'm looking forward to any discussions on it. I found it to be quite an interesting thought. Thank you very much.